Hope you're having a great day, and I welcome you to another episode of Ministry Matters That Matter. Today I have the privilege of having with me two friends, and they've been a blessing to my life, and they have blessed folks all over the Lord's church. They're known well in our area, but they're known well far beyond this area. I appreciate very much Ben Hayes and Travis Creasy hanging out with me today. What brought us together this week is that we are participating in the Titus Camp, Teens in Training for Useful Service, that is held each July at Heritage Christian University. And this is the 20th anniversary of the camp. So we've been celebrating that this week. And so since we're all here together, I wanted to gain some wisdom from them. And I actually have heard them both speak this week. Heard you every morning, and so that's blessed to start the day. It's been a blessing, and so let's just talk a little bit. You've got a lot of experiences in ministry. So some of the ones I know about, I know you've done youth work, you're a preacher, you've got a counseling degree and a counseling service, and so you do counseling on a regular basis. I know you've done youth ministry, you preach, you are a coach, you're a teacher, you work at a Christian school. I know you also interact a great deal with the Christian school. So you've got a lot of experiences in ministry and congregations and ministry with Christian schools that are trying to influence young people for Jesus. I would love to know what were the influences or who were the influences or influencers that motivated you in that direction. How did you end up with a life focused in these areas?
Well, I guess that's a big answer for me from the standpoint of ministry first, and then counseling kind of came secondary to that. We had several guys in our life. I think Travis and I could probably point to some of the same ones. We had good relationships with and we went to a small congregation, but we had Gary Gooch was our preacher, and Doug Jackson was our part-time youth minister. He was just somebody that was invested in us, did a lot of stuff with us. He's in full-time now, I believe, or at least works in that area. And so we've had a lot of good influences in ministry. Of course, after that, there were other preachers who came through and people who influenced us. And so from the preaching standpoint, it was probably that. I got interested in going to Freed Hardeman. Partly Stan Dean's son and I were good friends, and they were going, and he had encouraged. You talked about parents who encourage their kids to go into that, and so I guess I kind of rode that coattail a little bit and said, "Hey, I want to go hear about this place," because I'd never been there before, and so I went and got started there. And while I was there, my girlfriend that I dated for several years was killed in a car accident. And in that process, I decided that obviously I needed to go talk to somebody about that. And so Mr. Mark Crowell was a counselor there at Freed Hardeman. And so I visited with him several times. Ironically, I was actually in his class on death and dying when the accident occurred.
Wow.
And so because of the things he had been talking to us about in that class, I went to him. And it was then I kind of started thinking about, when I get through this, I kind of want to, I think I might want to do something like this. And so from that came my interest in it. I started working at Petersville Church of Christ. We had Lonnie Jones come for a youth rally. And as a result of that youth rally, we talked a lot about counseling. And he said, if you ever decide to go down that path, I'll supervise you. I'll jump through the hoops if you jump through the hoops. And so that's what ended up happening. He ended up being my supervisor. Worked real closely with him, been influenced by him a lot. And that's kind of how I ended up in the counseling world. Wow. So kind of a long answer, I know, but
that's good. That's perfect. What about you?
I point a lot to my 9-month older, not better looking cousin over there. Because I saw him doing those things, and I thought to myself, well, if he can do those things,
Surely anybody can do it.
Anybody can do them. He can do
and having that conversation. And I come from a home that's broken and, single parent. And, for some reason, at some level, I thought, well, that I can't do those things, but seeing him do it and his brothers do it and having a congregation that gave me opportunities to do that. And sometimes they didn't give it to me. They kind of pushed me into those things. And I oftentimes mention a guy by the name of Jess Kapler. I don't know if he ever got up and led a song or led a prayer or preached at all.
Yeah.
But our church on Sunday night would let the young men, any young man that wanted to lead a song could lead a song. And so that was one of my first things. And he pulled me aside. I don't know if he ever did this to you or not, but he would ask me to sing a song. And so just the little bit of confidence where he was like, I trust you to lead a song, the song I want to lead, that I won't get up there and lead. And I point to that. You mentioned Gary, his wife, Maddie, like little Sunday school teacher, and still doing it today at Jacksonburg. And I just think about her and her encouragement to me. I had this cousin in there that knew all the answers and all the Bible answers. And I thought, man, one day, man, I might could strive. If I could stick close enough to him, I might could do some of those things. And I went to Freed, and I really, a lot of it was following in Ben's footsteps and thinking that I could do that. And then, I always loved football. I'm a good old Southern boy, right? I love football. I won't mention the team so people won't cut the episode off. But I love football. I weighed 100. I might have weighed 100 pounds as a senior. Played high school ball at Central High School, and loved being a part of a team. Always have loved being a part of a team, and loyal to a fault, loyal to annoyance. And all those things kind of together, like there's a lot of people, there are kids out there from a broken home, and I would like to help them get through this whole thing and to let them know that God has a purpose and a value for them. And that's something I've been banging the drum for a long time. But I've just always loved being a part of a team. And to me, the church is a big team. And, with Ben and his experience he just shared, I had leukemia in 2018, and in 2019, I called, messaged him and said, hey, we got messages that need to get out there. It might be 2 episodes long. We might not do another episode, but you need to share your story. I'm going to share my story, and let's just get it out. And if we ever do it again, great. Now we're 200 something episodes in.
Out of control.
He can't get rid of me.
That's right.
But I think the team, family aspect, and people being nosy in my life and caring.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, when you were naming names, and I left off like Wayne Brederick.
Yeah.
Like everyday guys that weren't preachers, that weren't, the pulpit ministers or the youth ministers, but they say
annoying kids in it, that's
and it wasn't like at the time they had no idea the kind of influence they were having. They were just your guys who worked a job and probably were worn out and not wanting to, always have not always have the energy to sit down and study, but they did it anyway. And then they came and presented a lesson and probably found it a lot harder to do than what your full-time ministers have. And yet they put all kinds of time into us. And so I'd point to a lot of those guys and probably a lot that I could never name who had an impact in that way.
And my mom, I know that a long time she believed that she had no hope, that she, that she'd done too much, but we were there. Every time the doors were open, the Creasy boys were there, and 15 minutes late, but we were there. And man, I just appreciate that.
Lots of ladies holding it together.
Yeah.
I'm just was struck with the fact. By the way, in a minute, I want you to tell a little about your podcast, but I was just struck with the fact that ministry grew out of brokenness for both of you.
Oh.
And that often happens. And the impact of people, and many of them were the unsung heroes. For King and Country has a beautiful song, Unsung Heroes, about their mom. But I just want to say to those of you that may be joining us, watching or listening, maybe you're dealing with some brokenness. Think about the fact that there may be a way that God can use that for ministry. Also, think about the people who stepped into your void, into your life, like they had, and go say thank you to those folks while you can. And then also think about who it is that you could impact, that maybe down the road there will be podcast. I'm sure they'll have a holograms or something like that in the future. And they'll be telling about you, and a little hologram will pop up. Think about who you could influence. Before we go to any other questions, tell about a little more about your show, your podcast.
All the stuff. Well, it's me annoying Ben. Hey, we got to get this content down. But the Helping Healing Humor with Ben and Travis is more out of what you're saying, brokenness. And I love that it's helping, healing, and humor. And so we always try to cover some heavy stuff. And we've interviewed people who've been through some stuff and some things too. But we always bring it back to something funny, something lighthearted, and hopefully it's practical stuff that you can take home and do. And we put that out every Tuesday. Ben's got the Friday refresh. It's a little 3 to 5 minute motivational thing podcast. And then of course I got old Southern Boy football. I got one about that, and we have a lot of fun. And out of that, you just got to watch out, because Ben knows when he hasn't heard from me in a long time that there's a text coming, something about Staying Alive Disco Dodgeball or The Adventures of Ben and Travis children's book. So there's just all kinds of stuff. benandtravis.com. It's all there.
We do a blog every week. So there's that. We encourage people, if you need something for your bulletin,
need fun sing lyrics, to put it on hand motions, and that's all on there.
That's on there too. Yeah. So there's content on there. We just want to help further the cause of Christ.
They are a full service provider. Pump your gas if you want that. You actually went. I forget where I was at. I was I was traveling, because I travel a lot with my work at Heritage Christian, and I went to a gas station, and a guy came out to pump the gas for you.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
there's a place over here, like a mile from here. Yeah.
That is a trip. I mean,
they still do it.
I've gone back in time. It's 19.
Over there in Petersville, they'll pump it for you.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So my mind, this is what's happening. So as we think about ministering to people, what are some things that you see that especially today's young people are dealing with? There are some things that all generations and all times deal with, but then there are some unique challenges that come for certain generations. Do you see some things that today's young people, I'll start with you since I started with you first last time, that they're dealing with that you might want to share with us, and then any thoughts you might have on how we could help?
The thought that we just talked about for our episode with you is, I guess the phrase I would use, and it's a nice technical term I've heard Ben and Lonnie use, but emotional intelligence. That emotions aren't wrong. They're given to you by God, but what is appropriate? Our age kind of bridged that time where we went from like manual to digital. And so I'm so thankful for my upbringing where it was the duo, and we went outside and threw the ball around, and we kind of worked through our feelings together. I mean, and that's a blessing that a lot of people don't have, a cousin as close as we are, that even in things that we were going through, we were never by ourselves. We were never alone. But they never had that. These folks don't know a day and age where the digital wasn't dominating the situation. So I think that somewhat stunts the emotional intelligence. They have emotion and they have intelligence. That's not what I'm saying. They've got both of those things, but we need to be the ones coming along, like we're talking about the rhetoric, that bring the temperature down. And I'll be the first to say that I'm not always good at that myself, but helping them cope and manage with it. The problem is like their parents do know that, and they grew up like I did, right? Like I have a vision of what my childhood was and all the great and awesome parts. There were some bumps and bruises. They don't have that. There's not a time where there wasn't phone or access to something 24/7. And so I don't feel really equipped to even help them. So I can't imagine like my mom's age or people who are older than me that have kids my age, like trying to help them navigate that. And they're kind of the first ones. And so they need a little more help maybe in that, and kind of understanding that in my mind, if I'm getting bullied by someone on my phone, there's this little off button and it becomes a paperweight. when I was getting bullied at school, 3 o'clock, it was over till the next day. There is not that. And so, like, my identity is kind of tied to this thing, and my access to the world is tied to this thing. And so, even though I may know there's an on button, I don't want to do that because I lose who I am. Man, that opens up a whole thing that we ain't got enough time for. But that value and purpose, you have a value and purpose given to you by God that no one can take away from you, not even yourself.
Yeah.
Not even how you talk to yourself. And self-speak's a whole nother bag. Then.
Well,
Passing the self-speak torch.
yeah. Well, I was going to say two things that I think are very much tied together, and one of them you talked about is the self, identity, self-concept, self-esteem, whatever it is you want to say, and definitely agree with the emotional intelligence part. That's one of the things I do in the school. You were mentioning, that I work some with Christian education, and part of that is what we've seen is that kids just don't have that emotional intelligence, the ability to read the room, the ability to read what their friends are feeling and to stop doing what they need to do, stop doing what they're doing.
That no kid does.
No.
But the bombardment of what they have access to, we did not have to wrestle with that, and we had enough to deal with without it.
Yeah. Well, we all start off that way, but I think in years past you've learned how to deal with those emotions. I mean, growing up on a farm, you learned that things died. That things, you understood that's going to happen. That's part of life, and you had to deal with that. And you had wakes that would last for a week, and now it's like bottle that thing up and get on with it after 2 days. And it's we just don't deal with things as much or help them deal with things as much. And so helping people understand, because I think that's where a lot of these shootings and a lot of these things are happening, is because people get frustrated and not knowing what to do with that. So I think that's a big thing. And then the other part of that I'm seeing a lot as a counselor with this generation is just anxiety. There is a lot of anxiousness, which also those two things play a part with each other a lot. What do I do with these feelings that are here? And I bottle them, and they're like a volcano, and eventually they erupt. And there's things that I don't know how to deal with it. And I see that a lot with kids across the board, with my kids, with other preachers' kids, with people who are unchurched. I mean, it's just, I think some of that may have been the result of the pandemic, might have played a part in amping that up, because a lot of these kids were in really formidable years, at that time. And so I get that that's part of it, but I won't even say just the pandemic, but what we talked about on the last podcast with us is there is a lot of things that happened in a year or two. The world seemed
wasn't
to
just
be
caused by the
burning.
pandemic,
Yes.
but it was a convergence.
All of the
perfect
fighting and the frustration and all that, and then being cooped up for a year.
Racism, just all of that was mixed together.
Yeah, and I think it was already there. They were already anxious because they have the world at their fingertips with a phone, and every bad news you could ever think about pops up on the phone. And then that happened. And I think we just have, it seems like it is overwhelmingly the thing that
they've dealt with 2 economic downturns. If you think about Gen Z.
Yeah.
One thing I would encourage you to do in ministry is try to spend some time keeping up with cultural trends. I know that sounds like a strange thing. I'm in final editing stages of a book we're going to produce here at Heritage called In His Image, A Guide to Youth and Family Ministry. And I know you've got at least a chapter in there, but I do a lot of reading because of the nature of working in Christian higher education and on trends and generational theories, etc. And it's just overwhelming, especially with Gen Z, that anxiety level, that they've had so many things happen in their lifetimes. Okay. I mean, you think about from September 11th to now. Of course, with September 11th, you're dealing with those on the upper end of Gen Z, but And so I think anything we can do to give them peace and calm and hope.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're finding here at Heritage is a growth in our master's program and with an emphasis in ministerial counseling. Churches are looking for people who can do it. We've had a huge growth in the number of women doing it, because what a lot of elderships are realizing is we've got women who have things they need to talk through, and they don't feel comfortable talking to a guy about it. And so we're seeing ladies that are doing that. And I would say anything that your congregation can do to provide well-trained counseling. And I would say for those of you in ministry, anything you can do to improve your knowledge and ability to be able to walk people through problems. You not only know God's word, but okay, how do I walk a person through a problem by understanding what's going on emotionally and the influences in their lives, so that I know when, where I may know scripture, but I may not know enough about human development and problem solving to know where, when, where, and how to apply it. One more question I want to ask you is, what is some advice? You've had a variety of experiences in ministry and Christian education. For those out there that are serving in churches, that are working with Christian schools, what advice would you have for them, or maybe some lessons you've learned?
I think the biggest thing when I get asked that question, youth minister students and different ones call and want you to do these little surveys every now and then.
Yeah. I may have put some of those on you.
Yeah.
I want to apologize publicly.
One of those things that I usually say is relationships are key.
Oh, that's good.
I mean, you build relationships with people, because they will forgive you for a lot of bad, not bad teaching as far as doctrinal, but just presentation,
stumble over your words
or whatever. Gotcha. A lot can be forgiven when there are relationships, and I've tried my best wherever I'm at to build relationships with the toddlers all the way to the oldest members. Even when I was a youth minister, I wanted to know the older members. I wanted to talk to them. I wanted them to feel like they were seen. I wanted the kids to feel like they're seen. And so if a kid comes running up, I'm gonna take a knee and do my best to fist bump or talk to him or whatever. And if it's an older person, I'm gonna hug her neck or hug his neck and tell them how much they're appreciated. And I think relationships are so important. Travis and I use the line a lot with the Helping Healing Humor podcast, and that is love people where they are, love them enough not to leave them there. And just, if you have relationships with people, you can either encourage them to do more in the church, or you can encourage them to become a part of the church. And so relationships are key.
I think you quoted that in your chapter in the book. I may be wrong.
I might have.
I know I've heard you say that before. That's a good one.
Very similar to what Ben has to say in the relationship, but remember that you are a member of that church. The churches I've worked at, and I've been blessed to work at some great ones. The two best ones I've worked at, the eldership viewed me as a member needing to be shepherd, that needed leadership. And I can remember going into Pine Hill and telling them, I'm moving on. I'm moving to Albertville. I'm going to North Broad. And I was just heartbroken because I loved them so much. And I remember them looking at each other and going, this is what we prepared you for. This is what we were trying to get you. And they rehabilitated me. I was done. I was getting out. There would be no Ben and Travis. There'd be no, I'm done. I'm going to go do this. And Ben left to Petersville, and they hired me there with the help of Ray Reynolds. And I was whipped up. I mean, I showed up. I couldn't do nothing. I didn't want to do anything. And they rehabilitated me. And when I went in there and told them, they said, this is what we were preparing you for bigger and better things. And I was just like,
it gives me chills.
The church that I'm at now, I'm a member, and they're helping me along, shepherding me, giving me the same treatment as anyone else. And I guess the other part, once again, define the relationship. Make sure that if you're working at a place where there's part-time, vocational, bivocational, whatever, that it's defined what they're expecting from you. Because I've also been places where that wasn't the case, and I had a different idea of ministry than they did, and then later on it comes out, and it's a lot of things to fix to try and get back to what. And that was partly me not asking the right questions, and so define that relationship. Am I an employee? Is that what you're looking at me solely? Because that changes things and how I approach that, and maybe that's what you're looking for. But the ones I've had the most success at, I'm a member. I'm just like anybody else. I just get up in front, and a lot of people there don't want to do that. And so I kind of fill that role. But I think that's mine, define the relationship and try to get in somewhere where they look at you as a soul that's still growing and needs leadership and guidance.
I tell my students, get a job description. If they don't have one, ask them what they're looking for and write while they talk. Get an agreement and, just talk back and forth and get one. So I think a lot of the problems we have in churches between leadership and those working in various works is we're not clear on what's expected. Yeah. So if you have no job description, you have as many job descriptions as there are human bodies in that building.
Yeah. Yeah, but and I got a piece of paper when I got out of Free that said I knew everything.
Right? Really? They didn't give me that one.
That's what I thought that meant. And I had all these processes and strategies and schemes to get. And then, 6 months in, it's like, wait a minute, people don't play by that.
I know nothing.
Yeah. But, I think that's education. Education is about educating you on how much you do not know. Yeah. That's what I think.
God gives the increase.
Well, you hit on something I think is powerful, and that is we learned the last 2 churches we worked with, we placed membership. Because we were trying to send a message. We weren't hired help. We're one of you. You happen to be financially supporting us, so I can spend some extra time on things the church needs. But that's rich. Thank y'all so much for sharing.
Thanks that you do.
Well, I love you guys. I just love you tremendously. I love what your hearts and what you're doing for the kingdom, and even though you've had brokenness, you've had to deal with your life. You've let God use you and use that to do some pretty amazing things. And I'm grateful to Caleb for what he does and helping he does a number of different programs and podcasts, and in addition to all his work here at Heritage. Thank you for joining us. I pray that in this time together, there's been something that has connected to you and helped you. Just remember what you're doing matters. Ministry matters, but you matter. Just let God keep working in your life. Don't give up. Don't give in. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Ministry Matters That Do Matter.